everybody. Welcome to Gibson's Bookstore. Thank you for coming out on this very humid evening. Our HVAC system is only 4 years old, so it's going to keep up with us tonight. So thank you very much. We are very excited to have this event here tonight as we present Ellen Oppenheimer with Flight to Freedom. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you very much, and if I don't talk loud enough, please let me know. Before I start with the book, I have to say a couple of words, and I hope you bear with me. I want to thank you all for coming today to listen to my story of my family coming to the United States in 1942. And before I begin, I want to thank a few people. Danielle Merrill, she is our wellness coordinator at Calamar, where we live, who got the ball rolling to this event. She nagged and she nagged. I want to thank Gibson Bookstore for hosting this event.
Absolutely.
And last but not least, I want to thank my daughter Nancy. Until we finally came here to live here in New Hampshire. So the book is really about the memories of my sister and myself and the stories that my mother told us. They left Germany in 1933 because my father had been arrested by the Germans, by the Nazis. What they had done and had started to do was to cut off a street and ask for your identification. And if you were Jewish, you were pushed to the side until they had a few more. And once they had you against the wall, they would march you through the town with drawn guns and take you to the police station. And then they would seat you on the bench, leaving the door open, hoping that one of the men would leave and they would have a reason to shoot him in the back. Now, my parents had heard about these things, but you know, they thought that it was in different towns, different places, it wouldn't affect them. But he was arrested, and my mother received a phone call saying, you know, Bridget Simon, just want to let you know your husband Adolf was arrested, and he hung up. She didn't know who it was or how he found her phone number. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't call up her parents, who were old, and she didn't want to frighten them. So she remembered that she had given lessons, piano lessons, to the daughter of a policeman in the town of Fulda, where we lived. And she called him and she started to talk to him. He said, "Don't say anything more. I'll be right up." So he came up and he spoke with her, and she told him what had happened, where my father was. And she said, "I want to go with you to get him out." And he said, "No, no, no, you're not coming with me." And he turned his lapel and there was a Nazi insignia. He said, "I am not a Nazi, but in order for me to keep my job, I have to wear this. And if I appear at the prison with you, a Jewess," he said, "we'll both be in trouble." So he went and he got my father out. What he said to the commanding officer, what he did, she doesn't know. But my father, a couple of days later, came home and he told my mother the story of what had happened. And he said, "We have to start packing up because it is really getting very bad." But he could not apply for a passport or a visa because he now had a police record and they wouldn't give it to him. So they found out that at the time it started, they had an underground already in place. And my father left at dark one night with a little suitcase, and he left on foot, got to the French frontier, and from there he was passed on, from one house to the other until he got to Paris. In the meantime, my mother had to clean up the apartment. She still had passport to Italy, and so she took me and she got my sister, who was at her grandparents', to come to Italy. And there was my uncle, my father's brother, and he got us into France. All right, it's all in the book, that part. So now I'm going to talk about my mother, because she was really the moving person behind everything that we did. We got to Paris, and not much money, you must understand, no job, but my father got in touch. He looked around, and he found a company that needed salespeople to deliver toilet paper, letterheads, envelopes. And in those days, he didn't have a car or anything like that. So he had to make packages and go to the various customers who had ordered this stuff. And he asked my mother to help. Now, she had to do it too. But she decided this was not going to work. So she went to a bazaar, like a Goodwill, and she got a baby carriage. And into the baby carriage, she put all the packages, and she covered it up. And she was going to a customer. As she was crossing the street, a young bicyclist almost ran her down. And a cop was there, and he comes up on this young man. He said, "Can't you see this poor woman with the baby carriage? You almost ran her over. I mean, And my mother saying, don't look into the carriage, And then once he had berated the young man, he said to her, "Madame," and she went on, and she was very happy. Now, that's the beginning. My parents made a living. They joined with someone in a printing shop, and my father bought into it, and the life was very good. And it was, we were growing up, my sister and I. But then things started to come. The war started. I mean, they called it the False War. But the French, at the time, were not very happy. Were not happy with the Jewish people. They had, they didn't, what can I say? They tolerated them, let's put it that way. So an edict was issued that all men had to report to the police station. And from there, they would be taken to a camp because they were Jewish, and many of them were not French citizens, even though they had an identification card, just like we have them here sometimes, for people who don't drive anymore, they have an identification card. So my father was sent to one of the camps, and it was just outside of Paris. And my mother decided, because my father had had already 2 heart attacks, that she wanted him home. But she didn't know how to go about it. They had visiting days, but if you came on other days, you could get arrested. So she decided, well, she's going to go. And she asked around how to go and speak to a general. You have to be very specific. They had certain rules and regulations, like for instance, you have to say, "Mon général," my general. You could not offer your hand. He has to offer it to you. There was a lot of things that she learned. So she decided she's going to go. She went again to one of those bazaars, and she got herself a fur coat, and I mean a fur coat all the way down. And she filled the pockets, which were very deep, with cigarillos. And I want you to know this was in January, this is cold. So she went out there, and I want to read you what I wrote, although I know the story by heart. She went out there on a day where there was no visiting rights. And she went to the camp, and she went around, and she tried to get to see my father to tell him that she was here and this is what she was going to do. But he wasn't there, so she told the people who were behind it, tell him, I will be back. So she went to the main office, to the general headquarters, and there are guards, standing. And they said to her, may we help you? And she said, I'm Mrs. Simon, and I would like to see the general. Oh, well, you can't. You don't have an appointment. So she turned to one, and she said, do you smoke? Yes. Turned to the other one, do you smoke? Yes. Well, madame, maybe we can do something. So she went, and so they took her in, and they passed her on from one soldier to the next. They're always handing out these. And it got to the point where she came to the front door of where the general's office was. And she said, I would like to see him. He said, well, the general is very busy. I don't know. Do you smoke? Yes. Let me see what I can do for you. So he goes in and he comes out and he said, oh, the general will see you. So she goes in and he doesn't know for anything. He's sitting behind the desk and she said, I'm Mrs. Simon. I would like to speak to you. I really need to get my husband home. He's, he's had 2 heart attacks and I really think that he would be better at home. He said, well, Madame Simon, we're very good here. We take care of our people and everything. But she tried to convince him. She talked and he finally said, well, let me see what I can do. And she thanked him profusely, and then she made a slip. And she said, do you smoke? Oh. And he said, no, it was very nice. But my aide does. So she went over to the aide who was sitting there and he walked her to the door. He offered her his hand and he said, I will see what I can do. And left her. And she went out and she went back to the camp where my father was. And they found each other. And she said, what are you doing here? You're going to get arrested. It's not a day for visiting. She said, no, that's all right. Don't worry. I think I'll see you home very soon. And she went to the station, this train station, and she's waiting. And all of a sudden, the station master comes up behind her. And he said, come with me. And she turned around and she said, I'm not going to come. He said, you come with me. You're going to get arrested. So he took her up. He had an apartment at the railroad station. And he took her upstairs to their apartment. He said, I was told that a woman had come here to visit her husband, and it was not a visiting day, and they are looking for you, and if they find you, you're going to be arrested. So sure enough, as they're looking out over the station, the police or the soldiers came, they checked the station, the train came in, they went through the whole train, they didn't find anybody, and they left. So now it was getting dark, it's January, and she said they wanted her to stay there and take the train the next morning. But she said, no, I gotta get home. But there's no train and there's no bus. So she's looking out the window and she sees this expanse of land and she said, over there are some lights. What is that? He said, well, that's a street and you can catch a cab there to take you wherever you want. So she said, I'm going to walk across. And he said, it's the thaw, the field is not plowed or anything. You're not going to make it. And he said, oh yes, I'm going to make it. So she had on these, the women used to have little booties for the rain, just for the front, and they were like slingbacks. So she lost those in the mud, and she walked, and she finally got to the street, and there was a cab, and she said, I want to go to Paris, which was X amount of kilometers away. He said, no lady, I'm not going there. I'll give you double the price. And he took her, and she came home. She was exhausted, and my father came home 2 weeks later. So he was, but 2 weeks later, he was gone again. But this time, they sent him further away, and she could not get him out. So that was the beginning of it. Now my parents, now I have to go back for a moment. You know, in England, they took the children to the country when it was being bombed. Well, the French Israeli Girl Scouts did the same thing, and the Boy Scouts. They took the children out of Paris to take them to outside into the country. And my sister and I and my cousin who had come to live with us went with this children's transport. We went to Beaulieu-sur-Dordogne and he went to Moissac, which is all in the central part of France. It's called the Massif Central. And they had the boys in Moissac and the girls. And this is what my parents had said. If we get separated, this is where we'll meet. Because I don't know how, what's going to happen to you. And I have the children. And we'll go. But I have to say something in between. The French were very, very peculiar. My sister and I, as I said, my cousin went with the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. All of a sudden, the French said a woman who has 3 children to take care of and has 1 child living with her does not have to be deported because they were deporting the women too. The French were, not the Germans. So my sister came back to stay with my mother in Paris. I stayed in Beaulieu, and then when things started to get very bad, my mother and my sister came to where I was. All right, I was with the Girl Scouts, everything was fine. Then the rumor started that the Germans were coming to this town. My mother got scared. She didn't want to stay. So the French soldiers were retreating. And as it happened, there was a troop stationed there, and they were leaving the next morning. And she asked the commanding officer there where they would take her and my sister and myself to another town because the Germans were coming. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll be in the middle of the night, but you gotta be in this building, and I'll have my sergeant come and take you, and you're gonna have to sit in the trucks, and they're open trucks. Well, as it would happen, it was pouring rain, and we got on those trucks, and where my mother got the rope or anything, she tied my hand to hers, my sister's hand to the other, and we sat on the open trucks through the night on our suitcases, going deeper and deeper. The next day we wound up in the town. It was a beautiful day, and he comes up and he says, I'm sorry, I can't take any more civilians, I've got my orders. And here we were in a town, we didn't know what was going on. Well, anyway, the convents opened up their doors. And in France, they have, I don't know whether you've seen them, the convents had like arcades, and they had put straw on the ground so that people could sleep because they didn't have any more room. And so we were there, and we fell right onto the hay and just fell asleep. Then we woke up, we went to have lunch, and we met a lot of people that my mother knew from Paris, who were also moving at the same time, to get away from the Germans. And they're sitting there having lunch, and all of a sudden this guy comes up. I mean, he must have seen a movie from America, he wore a trench coat, and a hat, and everything. He comes up and he looks and he says, what are you doing here? And my mother said, we're having lunch, No, you're of the 5th column. He said, I want you out of here. By tonight, if you're not out of here, I'll get you arrested. So my mother said, okay, fine. So we wandered around. We tried to go to another town, but you needed a permit and you needed a bus. Neither one was available. So we just wandered around, and then we figured, oh, well, he's not going to come back. We'll go back and have dinner. As we're having dinner, he comes again. He said, okay, out, everybody, women and children, put us by a tree. He looks at my mother and he said, you are the ringleader. You come with me. And he took my sister, my mother took my sister, and I'm standing by the tree, and she said, don't worry, I'll be back. And they marched her and my sister through the town with armed guards to the mayor's office. Okay. So he goes in, and I'm sorry, my nose is running. And my mother goes to enters the office, and the mayor starts talking. My mother said, you know, my papers are all legitimate. Everything is fine. You know, here are my papers, you know, whatever you need. And in my paper, in her papers, was a small picture of me. And he picks that up, and he looks at it, and he said, whose little girl is that? And my mother says, my daughter, my other daughter. And he looks, he said, a woman who has a child looking like that is not of the fifth column. What can I do for you, madame? So she told him what she needed to have done. She needed a permit, and she needed a permit to be able to get out of town. And she said, and I have my friends. He said, just send them all to me. I will take care of everything. And that was the end of that. And when she came out, and this guy, you know, he couldn't believe that the mayor had let her go and believed what she said, not what he had said. So we lived there for a while. We found an apartment. Oh, God, that was some apartment. Across the way, there was a river. And in those days, they did not have indoor plumbing. So in the morning, the pots all went into the river. And across the way was a tannery. And when the wind blew the wrong way, it was overwhelming. So every day she went to the bus station, and one day the guys told her, yes, there is a bus leaving tomorrow morning. And so she said, can I sleep in the bus tonight? And he looked at her, she said, you know, tomorrow all the people will be there to want to get a seat. If I'm in there already, I will have a seat for myself and my daughters. And she gave him a little bit of money, you know, under the table. And sure enough, at about 8, 9 o'clock at night, we got onto the bus and we slept on the bus. And the next morning, we cleaned up at the bus station, and the bus took us. My mother wanted to go to a large city, and she wanted to go to Toulouse because, how am I going to explain this? The Jewish people, or I would say, opened up an office where, let's say, you were looking for your husband. You would go there or I would go, let me put myself in here. I'm looking for my husband. I would go there and I would say, my name is Ellen Simon, and I'm looking for my husband John, and I'm staying at this and this address. If somebody comes in with that name, tell them that this is where, and that's how they reunited the families that had been scattered all over the country. So this is what she did. We found a place. We went there. Now you got to find a place to stay, but there's no place to stay because all the apartments, all the hotel rooms are taken. So she's passing by the hotel, and she goes in and she said, "Can I leave my suitcase?" Because we're dragging our suitcases with us. And he said, "You can leave them here, but I don't have room for you. There's no room available." So she said, She said, "What about this room, this big room?" Oh, he said, that's a restaurant. We have a room there where people eat and have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and so on. She said, "But you clean it up at night, don't you?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "How about we go into that room? You give me a couple of blankets. My daughters and I will sleep on the floor. We don't want to sleep on the street," because people were sleeping on the street because there was no other place. And he said, "Okay, so you come back at about 10:30. So we walked the streets. The suitcases were in the hotel. And at about 10:30 we came in. He gave us some blankets, and we slept indoors. And I'm just going to add something. We left Toulouse, and I'll tell you why in a minute. When we came back, the place was full. He collected money. He made money on this whole thing. She had given him a good idea to open this up and have people come in and pay to stay so they didn't have to sleep on the street. So anyway, this we did that for a couple of nights. There was also the post office. You could write to the post office and say, for instance, you could send, I want to find, you put down you sent a letter addressed to your husband or to your wife, and then if you went to the post office and showed credentials, you could pick up your mail, and this way it was also a way of getting together with your family. So on this particular day, and I remember this like it was yesterday, it was on a Friday, and we went to the post office, and there was a letter from my father. He had sent out the letters to all the post offices that he could think of. And he wrote, "I'm sick and tired of chasing this crazy woman." He said, "Every time I got to the town that you were in, you had already left the day before." So he said, "I'm sick and tired of doing this. I'm with my cousin in Moissac, and if you want to see me, that's where I am." So it was on a Friday. We went to the bus depot, and there was a bus leaving within an hour or so. So we quickly went back to the hotel, grabbed a little bit to, a suitcase, and we went on the bus. And we arrived there, and the bus stopped. Now, in all those small towns, it was the center of the town. There was a church, and it was very backwards. I mean, today I understand it's much nicer and everything. And they have a fountain. And as we got off the bus, and the bus pulled away, these men were standing around because they were on the move too. And somebody looked up and recognized my mother, tapped my father on the shoulder because he wasn't facing the bus. And he turned around, and there we were. And I tell you, my mother said my father kept waking up in the middle of the night just looking at her and looking at us. So we went back to Toulouse, and he had met someone there, and they had traveled. Now, when my father was in that second camp, things got very bad. The Germans were advancing and everything. And the head of the commanding officer gathered them all together, and he said, "Look, I hate the Germans worse than the Jews. I'm going to let you go. But do not travel during the day because the planes will find you. You have to travel at night." So the whole group left and traveled at night, stayed in the forest during the day, and found caves where they stayed, during the day, and just traveled at night. And my father had met a man there, and he came back with us to Toulouse. He was looking for his wife and 3 sons. And we went back to Toulouse because we figured a big city would be the best place to be. And we came back, as I said, and we found all these people sleeping on the floor. But he found, the manager found us a room, 1 room, 2 beds, and let's see. Yeah, he found his wife, and she came back. So there we were, a husband and wife, two adults, and 5 children, 1 room. So the beds were for the grown-ups, and the children slept on the floor with my sister underneath the sink. But we were indoors, and so on. And the friend that my father had met, he and his wife went back to where she had been hiding in a farm, and their oldest son died. He was with the Marquis. He died during the war. And we were living in Toulouse, and we thought everything would be all right. And my mother got the shock of her life after we moved into an apartment because across the way was a whorehouse. What she found out was they scared out their bedding, my mother, that's, she knew that. But anyway, things started to get very bad in Toulouse. They were starting to cut off the streets again. So we found out that where I had been with the Girl Scouts, my mother went back, and my father went back, and then we closed the apartment and we stayed there. And we met a lot of people there, but things again started to go, and finally they took out the papers that my uncle had sent her a long time ago. Now, in order to, you have to go to the U.S. consulate, and we actually belonged to the consulate in Lyon, but we had heard that the consul there was not very nice, and that the one in Marseille was much nicer. So in order to do that, she had to go to Marseille to establish residency, and so that we would be taken there. So she found a hotel, and they were willing to, she gave them money to forward any mail, and she went to the consulate and to see what was going on. But we were far away. In order to get there, you had to take the bus and then the railroad. So she decided, for us to go to Marseille and then wait around until we get called. So she went down, she came home, and the next time she went down, she took a basket of eggs. Don't forget, we were living in farm country, so you had eggs, you had milk, you had chickens, you had all kinds of stuff. She filled that all up in a basket, and she went down to Marseille, and she went to the consulate. And there's one guy, he says, he gives out the numbers and everything. So she approached him, and she said, Aunt so-and-so sends regards. And he's looking at, I don't have anything. She said, yes, you do have an aunt. She lives out of town. And she told me to come and talk to you. And I have something for you, but I can't give it to you right here. So he said, okay, come, let's go to the back, So she gave him the basket of all these things. And she said, now, I need a low number. And so that when I come to Marseille with my family, I can get in. And that's how she bribed her way into it. She would bring, she would go. And finally we had to go before the consul. And we're waiting. The room was like this, and there were more people. People were sitting on the floor waiting to see the consul. And the door opened, and the consul said, next. And my mother said, wait a minute, stay here. My father, my sister, and I. She went in, and she came out, and she said, he'll see us after lunch. She said, I noticed that his voice was very tired, and it was almost lunchtime. And I said to him, maybe it would be better if we come after lunch, when you have eaten something and have rested. And he was so grateful that he told his aide outside, after lunch, the Simon family is coming in first. So we all went to lunch, and when we came back, he himself opened the door for us and we sat down in his office, and it went like grease lightning. He approved us 1, 2, 3, and we were accepted to go to the United States. Wow. All right, so I'm going to skip that one, and I'm going to go to how we got here. We were supposed to go by train to the Spanish frontier to Portugal to catch a boat there. December 7th, 1941. Spanish frontier closed. Couldn't go through. How do you get all these people? Trainload of people. So what they did, and these are the Jewish organizations who took charge of everything, they got 2 boats to take us across the Mediterranean to Oran. And then from Oran, we took the train to Casablanca. And coming from dark, cold Europe, this was December, to come into North Africa where the sun was shining and everything, and the train is traveling through and stopping at stations, and people coming up to the train trying to sell you hard-boiled eggs and bread and fruits and everything. It was unbelievable. I mean, from darkness to lightness. And we got to Casablanca, and we had to wait for the boat to come from Portugal around to pick us up. And my parents met someone that they had known in Paris, and they invited us to their house. And when they took us home, they walked with us, and they had two guards with them. I mean, tall, heavy-set men with clubs. And we said, why do you have that? You know, why? They said, they rob you at night. It gets cold. They rob you of your clothes so that you are only in your underwear, and there's no one around to stop it. So anyway, so we waited in the sun. The ship finally came. We get up, we had the 4 tickets, and apparently the price went up because they said, well, you have 3 tickets, but the 4th ticket it's not valuable now anymore. You can't use it. For second class, it would have to be down in the whole, third class. And my mother said, okay, fine. My daughter will sleep down there. And I'm looking at my mother. What do you mean I'm going to sleep down there? Don't worry, everything will be all right. So we got,
She heard you.
You're more electric than this storm will ever.
Anyway, I didn't sleep in the hold, of course not. And we were in a cabin. The men were in one cabin, the women were in another cabin. It was a very small ship. It was one of those ships that plied the Mediterranean in the summertime. And the captain had never been to the United States before, so he didn't even know anything. And the Germans were there, and we get on, and all of a sudden, we're ready to sail, but the boat gets called back. And it seems that the Germans who were in there, who knew that this was all Jewish people, wanted a ransom. And, and so they came to all the passengers and said, if you have any money, and we know that you do because we know that you have, you've hidden it somewhere, and please give us what you can. We're trying to get in touch with New York and with Paris and with and London to see if we can get the money together. And my father said to my mother, we don't have any money. My mother said, yes, we do. So he said, what do you mean? I don't know. She had taken money, she had opened up the seam of that fur coat, and she had lined the bottom with money. So she opened that up, and she had the money there. Not all of it, but we were able to contribute. So that was paid, and we were allowed to go.
How old were you at this time?
I was 12. So we're ready to sail, and it gets called back. Unfortunately, an old man died on board, and the family did not want to bury him at sea. So they took him out, and they took him on a bus, and the family walked a couple of steps behind the bus, and then we were able to sail. Now, the Germans had told the captain, do not sail at night, and if you do not, and once you stop, put on your lights and make sure that your flag is shown, because Portugal was neutral, so they wouldn't attack. So it took that forever. I guess my mother was seasick the whole trip. The whole trip, from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. And we got here on January 13th, 1942.
Where did you land?
And
Where did you land?
in Staten Island.
Oh,
The captain must have seen, no, we stopped off in Bermuda, and we stopped off in Cuba, and they wouldn't let us in Cuba because we had measles on board. and the British didn't want us to come into Bermuda, so they came on board and they checked us all out and checked our papers and everything. And then in Cuba, a lot of people only had the fare to Cuba, so they got off. They couldn't come into the United States. So when we saw the Statue of Liberty, I think the whole ship was going to go over because we had storms and everything. But he saw the pier and he went right in, Staten Island. There was nobody on the pier, just a few workers, and they didn't know who we were, what we were.
How many of you were there on the boat?
I don't know. I don't know. All I can tell you is that there were people downstairs, you know, in the halls. That's where people were living. My mother went down to pay a visit when that old man died, and she said, it is horrible. There was no air. The people were just lying on top of each other. They just wanted to get out of Europe. And they would go any which way to come. And she said it was horrible. She would bring down food sometimes down there from the, oh, that I have to tell you. Because I was third class, I could not eat in second class, right? My mother wasn't going to have any of this. So my sister, my mother, and my father would go into the dining room, eat very slowly. My sister would eat a little bit faster. She would leave. I would come in. I would order, you know, I would get something. But didn't you? No, you know. But that's how it worked. Nobody got. But anyway, my sister had learned a little bit of English, and she spoke. We were examined and talked to. I mean, somebody called up the authorities, and all of a sudden they were swarming all over the boat. And she called up my uncle, and he said, "Where the heck are you?" He said, "I got a telegram from the people that you met in Casablanca, giving me the name of the ship and everything. I can't find you anyplace. I've been in touch with Washington. I don't know what's going on." And he said, so he came, and we got on the ferry with the car, and my mother was scared stiff. Because how can you go up with a boat and have a car? And she didn't want me to get out of the car because she was afraid I would drown or something. Anyway, my father finally got to my relatives, and my father saw his mother for the first time in over 10 years. It was a very moving, and unfortunately I have to end that part with the fact that my father died exactly 4 weeks after we got here. On February 13th, he had his last and final heart attack. I was home alone, so I'm not going to go into that. But my mother picked herself up and went to work at a factory in Brooklyn, and where she worked piecework, putting soles on sandals. And eventually she got another job in a children's factory, and she had to join the union. And she didn't want to have anything to do with the union. She was tired. She wanted to go home. She wanted to be with her kids. And she would get up, and the guy would say, "Mrs. Simon, please sit down." And it got to the point where she would go to the meetings, and she would get up, and the whole audience would say, "Mrs. Simon, please sit down." And she worked all her life, and finally she retired, and my sister and her husband took a trip, and they took her with her, and she took her first air flight, and she went to see relatives in Israel and in England, and unfortunately things started to go bad after that. She developed Alzheimer's, and she died very peacefully 40 years after my father. And that's the story that I wrote. Now, any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank you for making her do this. Okay, part 2 is that I can see this being done with Meryl Streep in America. You're laughing. You are laughing, but this is amazing. amazing drama, and it's real. It's real, but it would have to be serialized because you have got so many pieces that are so exciting, you know. And the third thing is this. Ellen is involved in a caregiver support group that several of us are members of, and she's a little bit nervous about today. Honey, all I want to tell you is you are a damn
If you have any questions, I'll be very happy. Yes, ma'am.
There were a lot of details in the book,
Yeah.
and I was wondering how you and your sister and mother remembered all those
Well, I
details.
tell you, after my mother passed away, my sister and I went down to Florida, and we talked about my mother. And to be honest, when she finally passed away, it was not the woman that we knew. She died for both of us a long time before. The soul and the heart of that woman was gone. But we went down to Florida and we started to talk about her. And we said, you know, we really should write it all down for our children. My sister had 3 children and I have 3 children. And that's how it all started. And so my sister remembered and I remembered and we remembered things together. And she said, Ellen, write it down. And she said, you write it down and I'll supply you with things, because she remembered, of course, from Germany more than I did. And but once we landed, somehow or other, once we landed in France, somehow or other, I remember coming into Paris and the train station and my father standing next to a post with flowers for my mother. And that's where my memories begin. So between my sister and myself and the stories that my mother told us, I put it all together. And unfortunately, my sister died 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years tomorrow. And somehow or other, it's sort of a given. I'm very happy that I'm here because I wish you were here. Because she was part of the book too.
You know what? What a gift for all of us.
Yeah.
What a gift for all of us. Yeah.
So if you have, yes, sir.
Ellen, could you tell the part after you met Martin and then he took you to meet his father?
I'm sorry.
How you met
After
Marty,
you
and
met
how
Martin,
How I
and
met
then-
my husband.
no, how
and-
when
and
you
then
took
he
him
took
home
you
and
to
everything,
meet his
you
father.
knew Marty, he knew you. The people.
Dad's
yeah.
father.
Oh, you
Dad's
want to
father.
know? Okay. I met my husband on a blind date.
Remember 203. She only had 203 blind dates.
I'm getting to that. I'm on a blind date, and I'm not going to go how this all happened. But anyway, my husband to be, and we were just dating yet, decided he wanted me to meet his family. So he lived in the Bronx, and we lived in Washington Heights, and that's in Upper Manhattan. And we got there, and I didn't meet his mother or his brother because his mother had passed away the year before, and his mother was in the Navy. So his sister was home, and not his father. So I spoke with her, and then we were going to go home. He was going to take me home. And as we're walking down the street, his father comes up, and he said to his father, Dad, I want you to meet, oh, he says, I know who you are. I said, I've never met you before. He said, no, he said, your name is Simon. I said, yes. He said, I know you. You look just like your father. He and I were apprentices together in Germany. My goodness. So I had to marry him. but there's a follow-up on this. I called up my mother, and I said, I'm going to have dinner at Marty's house. You can't do that. I said, why not? It's a young man. I said, it's a young man. I'm not having dinner with him. I'm having dinner with his father and his sister. You can't do that. I said, Mom, this is all in German, I want you to know. I'm going to stay, I'm going to have dinner, and Marty is going to bring me home. So I got home, and she said, Ellen, you can't do that. You're a young lady. I told you, a young lady is like a silk handkerchief. You put a spot on it, you can't wash it out. I said, so then she goes, you know, what are the neighbors going to say? I said, well, unless you tell them, they're not going to. So that was the story. That was my mother. She had her ups and downs and her she want everything had to be just so. So I shouldn't make any mistakes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Ellen, did your mother ever tell you how she met your father?
She met him during World War One. My father was he got hit in the cheek and in the back, and what saved him in the back from losing a leg was he had his prayer book in his back pocket, and that stopped the bullet. But she was hoping to have someone else, another guy. And how I found out was when she had, and I'll get back to that, when she had Alzheimer's, she kept calling Walter, and not my father's name, Adolf. And that's how I figured out she had a boyfriend. And his name was Walter, but he died during the war. And my father was in the hospital in Göttingen, where my mother lived, and there were 4 daughters in that household, my mother being the youngest. They had parties, they did things for the soldiers and everything. And at one of the dances, my father met my mother. And that's how they, but they didn't get married during the war. Both sets of parents, not during the war. So they got married afterwards.
Thank you.
The languages when you went from Germany to France, do you all speak French?
My sister and I, we went to school in France,
Yes.
and my mother picked it up. My father had trouble with languages, but my mother spoke French fairly well, and my sister and I. My sister was I want to tell you something about my sister. My sister was very smart. In order to get to the lycée, which is like a college, in Paris, they take the top 10% of the students. Out of that 10%, 1% could be Jewish. And my sister was accepted. And then my parents looked at me and she said, not her.
But you have the sense of humor. She didn't have it.
And, yes, ma'am.
Did your male cousin make it out of France?
Did my husband?
Your cousin, your male cousin?
Oh, yeah. Well, my male cousin couldn't. This is a story. He was supposed to come with the children's transport to come to the United States, and he was supposed to meet us on the pier. He was supposed to be even there before us. But someone, how am I going to explain this? The mailman was delivering the mail, and this man said to the mailman, the mailman said, I have a letter for the Simon family, and he said, oh, I'm going to the Simon family house. I will take the mail for them. But he got engrossed in his own mail, forgot about going to the Simon house, and the letter that was for my cousin to meet with the children's transport to go to the United States never appeared, and my mother was beside herself. And when the man finally came, he said, oh, I happened to find the letter. My father almost killed him. I mean, there were people in the house. My father had his hands on this man. You know what you have done. He said, I never want to see you again. So what happened is, he went back to the Boy Scouts in Moissac, and as things got very bad, they decided they're going to go to Switzerland. So what they did, they drugged the small children, and then they put tape over their mouth, and they carried them over the frontier into Switzerland.
Wow.
And there they were put into a camp by the Swiss because they didn't know who they were, so, but at least they were safe. And then when we came here, my mother looked for a relative of my cousin on his father's side, and found an aunt who lived in the Bronx, and between the 2 women, they put up the papers so that my cousin could come from Switzerland, and he came to the United States. Because he had come, his mother, my mother's sister had passed away, and her husband married a woman who had a child, and the 3 children could not get along. My 2 cousins could not get along, so the oldest one went to Israel, and Hudi came to live with us, and my uncle, my aunt, and a newborn baby died in the concentration camps. And one of my mother's sisters and her husband and the 2 boys also died in the concentration camp.
How did you survive all the trauma? I mean, did your mother keep the holiday tradition? What did
I
you
don't
do?
know.
You don't remember?
I wish I could answer. I don't know where she got the ideas
She was so strong.
or the wherewithal. I mean, I know she told me her father was very upset to go to the synagogue and name a little girl because he wanted a boy, and now she was the fourth child, the 4th daughter, and he decided, well, this one is not going to be raised like a daughter, like a girl. He got her a carriage and a horse, and she got roller skates, and she was the first one in her group to cut her hair short, and this is what he did. And
So was anyone bar mitzvahed, or
I'm sorry.
did anyone make their bar mitzvah at any point, or?
No. My
No, just-
parents were very proud to have the bar mitzvah for my cousin, but in Europe they didn't have bat mitzvahs
Right,
for women,
right.
for girls. They have that here, but they didn't have it in Europe. So we never did. So I don't miss it. Any other questions?
What was the age difference between you and your sister?
3 years and 11 months.
But who's counting?
Yeah, and I miss her.
Yeah.
Any more questions? And I want to thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate it.